Hey everybody, it's Chris from Xano, and I'm here today to talk to you about a brand new feature called Debug Log. Similar to JavaScript's console log command, Debug Log will allow you to output specific data or messages to a debug log in Xano while you are using run and debug. This can be super helpful for diagnosing specific issues inside of your function stack. We're going to hop into Xano. I'm going to show you how it works, and I'm going to give you a practical example for when you might want to use this feature. Okay, so here we are in Xano. I'm going to go over here to my function stack, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a create variable step, just so we have something to work with. We'll give this a quick value of hello. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now I'm going to add another step, and this is under utility functions, and we are looking for debug log. Debug log is going to allow us to output the contents of this variable to the debug log in Xano. So we'll go ahead and choose our variable and we'll click save. And now when we run this, you'll notice that we have a new tab here in Run and Debug called Debug Logs. And if we click on that, you can see that we have our hello value right there. And it's really that simple. You just add the debug log step to your function stack and add any data that you want to appear inside of that debug log. You do also have the ability to add any of our filters to this as well if you would find that useful. So let's jump into a practical example of how you might use debug log in a real world situation. Okay, so here we are in a brand new function stack. What I'm doing is I am doing a query all records on a very large table. I have it limited to about 1,500 results just for the sake of this example. And then I'm using a for each loop to update a specific value inside each of those returned records. All I'm really doing is just applying a simple text transformation to one of the fields to turn all of the letters to uppercase. So let's go ahead and run this. Everything looks good. It's a very simple function stack, and let's see what happens. Okay, so it looks like we're done, but we did get an error. It says argument 1 must be of type string null given. So what that probably means is that at some point we have a record that has a null value that's being passed to this filter, which of course won't work because we cannot apply text transformation to a null value. So typically we would go over to the debugger and we would look and see which record that is so we can fix it. So let's go to the debugger, and you can see we'll scroll all the way down here to the very bottom, and let's take a look at the last item. Okay, so it looks like the last item in our debugger does have an answer. This is not null. So what's going on here? Well, if we scroll back up to the top, we can see that it says this function stack is limited to showing details on the first 1,000 entries. This is just so we don't completely overrun your memory while you're running and debugging a function. However, there may be still some instances, like the one we can see here, where we need to see every little piece of what's running through this loop so we know which record to address. Our table has over 400,000 entries in it, so it could be pretty difficult for us to find those problematic records and edit them, especially if there's more than one. So what do? We can leverage debug log to track the IDs of each of those records so we know exactly the one we need to address. So let's go ahead and add a new step. We're going to go over to utility functions and we will choose debug log. The value that we want to log here is going to be item.id. So we're looping through records that are coming from our Xano database. So we can just check the IDs and that will tell us the problematic ID that this function actually halts on. And we can see that in the new debug logs in the debugger. So let's just go ahead and run this again. Okay, so the execution has completed, and now because we've added that new debug log step, we can head over to the debug logs, and this is not limited in the same way that the debugger is as far as how many steps it can show or how many items it can return. This just lives in your browser memory, so it's not really going to be limited in any capacity in terms of what your Xano instance can handle. This is just purely dependent on what platform or what machine you're using Xano on, really. So we can just go ahead and expand all of this all the way down to the end, and we can find our problematic value. Of course, scrolling all the way down to the bottom of this list and continually expanding will give us the answer that we need, but it's not super efficient. So we can actually improve this function stack a little bit more. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a conditional, and I'm going to check item.answer So if item.answer is null, then we are going to use debug log to output the ID. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and update the variable. And let's run this one more time. Our function has finished running one more time. We still have the error as expected, but now we can see in the debug logs, we have that ID, so we can go right into our table and fix the issue. And that's it. That's all there is to the new debug log function. We really hope this helps you when you're troubleshooting issues inside of your function stacks. One thing to note though before we wrap up is that the debug log functions will only execute when you are using run and debug. They will not impact external calls to your APIs. So you can go ahead and just leave these steps in there and they're not going to hurt anything. Similar to stop and debug, which we probably could have used to address this example in the past, stop and debug will halt execution regardless of where that API is being called from. Debug log is a little bit more flexible in that you can just leave these steps in your function stack and call the API externally, and it will continue to execute as normal. Thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments below. You can also reach out to us via support inside Xano or on the Xano community. We'll see you in the next one.